bus, she said she drank the juice right then. When the bus jolted, she must have held on with her right hand, leaving only the left hand free. I heard that she and her mother cried, holding each other on the bus. Isn't it wonderful? You can use your left hand. When I heard this story, I was also pleased. I didn't really intend to make her left hand stronger, but because she was practicing her bowing, she developed strength.
The
biggest change in my life was being able to use my left hand freely. Emotionally and psychologically, I was always hiding my hand in front of people. I spent much of the time crying. But Miss Mori told me that if I cry all the time, the sound of the violin would reflect my sorrow. Since then, I began to laugh more often. I stopped hiding my hand and began to use it naturally. Also, things I thought I couldn't do before, by practicing, by repeating them over and over, like the violin. I proved to myself that I could accomplish anything.
Dr. Suzuki is fond of saying that his method is for the good of all children.
As far as I know, Suzuki never studied psychology formally, and yet he has a kind of intuitive understanding of kids, which I find very, very unusual. He arrived at something which, on the one hand, really respected children for who they are, didn't try to make them into something else, but yet on the other hand, really got them to appreciate and to perform music in a way which we who don't know about Suzuki might not have thought was possible.
He respects the person. He recognizes what they have inside, and he tries to bring it out. And he goes about it whichever way, communication-wise, psychology, his psychology of teaching, just watching him teach many different people. He just switches the right avenue for each individual person, and they all respond to him.
He can convey things to the children and get results in just a really magical way. And I think his teaching is effective not just in that he can get these magnificent results, he gives them something for keeps. And it really becomes, in a way, a life-changing or very momentous occasion.
One of the first programs to teach the Suzuki method in the United States was a New York State grant project called Super.
The summer of '66, we got $30,000 from the National Endowment and from the New York State Council of the Arts. And we named the project Project Super. SU stood for Suzuki, of course. P was for Penfield, one of our quite affluent suburbs. E was Eastman, and R was Rochester. So from all these areas, teachers were called and asked if they would like to participate in this experiment. Because one of the objectives of this project was to see if it was feasible in several different situations, that is, in the affluent suburbs, at Eastman, which was like conservatory type of school that drew students from every area, and also in the Rochester public schools. So our adventures began, and of course they were very exciting, and the impact was interesting. It seemed to gather force.
After the American String Teachers Association brought the first Suzuki children to the United States in 1964, the Suzuki method spread rapidly. In 1971, the Suzuki Association of the Americas was formed. It included all of the Western Hemisphere. In 1975, the first international conference took place in Hawaii. A series of international meetings followed with the countries of Japan, the United States, Canada, Germany, Australia, Korea, and Ireland, serving as hosts to the Suzuki Method World Conventions.
The SAA's prime purpose has been to bring Suzuki people together, to sponsor things for Suzuki teachers and parents and children, and to develop more teachers to offer training, and to try to raise the standards of excellence in teaching.
It's probably our prime focus is the development of teachers.
And now we're at a point where we want to create recognition of what is a Suzuki teacher. And so we want to create a very highly professional organization that reaches teachers in organizations at a local level, a state level, a regional level, a national level, and the International Suzuki Association.
At the 1983 Matsumoto Conference, the ISA, the International Suzuki Association, was formed. In 1991, the ISA became the sponsor of the conferences. Dr. Suzuki has been a very strong influence at all world meetings. After World War II, America viewed Japan as a source for cheap miniaturized goods and inexpensive cameras. However, imitation would soon give way to innovation, and Japan would make major strides in the fields of electronics and automotive manufacturing. And imitation was considered an early step toward creative development.
Everything we know about the mind of the young child is the young child likes to imitate, likes to get better, and I think it's a perfectly valid approach. I would not dismiss any approach just because it has a fair amount of imitation in it.
In the Western civilization, the idea of copying has gotten a bad name over the years. But in all honesty, in the Renaissance, in different art forms, in ballet, in art, copying was a means, what was part of the process.
Painter went to the Louvre Museum and copied the great paintings. That is the starting of studying arts, don't you think? Yeah. The Suzuki method is the same thing. If we don't copy the great paintings, great music, we can't make real music based on that foundation.
The impressive mass performances of hundreds of children has spurred much criticism from traditional music teachers. Traditionalists often describe the playing of Suzuki students as robotic, mechanically correct, but lacking true musical feeling.
We probably emphasize individual interpretation and expression more in the West than in a more Confucian kind of society. But my observation of Suzuki is that one of the most important lessons is that this is a realm in which feeling is appropriate. I've always thought it was very weird in school that we put kids in individual seats and we penalize them for working together, when in the workplace, that's certainly, you want people to be able to work together cooperatively. And I think that Suzuki has been very appropriate in seeing how much of the learning really does take place when you have a wide group.
We mustn't forget one fundamental concept here, and that is we are in the communication business, first and foremost. Music is a unique form of communicating. And so the study of music really is the study of how to translate the language of music, which everyone responds to, and incorporate them into yourself in a way that someone else can feel them on a musical level. And that's a very sophisticated learning process. The giants have an ability to communicate on a spiritual level, to help one through this translation process. One such person was Dr. Suzuki himself.
Mass concerts have also been equated with mass production. Yes, Suzuki often uses group lessons to help children learn by example, but training is still individual in the classroom and at home.
I believe that the heart of Suzuki instruction is individual. Dr. Suzuki believes very much in the individual child's ability, in not measuring that child against any other child. Your best yardstick for measurement is that child himself or herself. The instruction even has its own support system. The parent who is the home teacher, is right there in that private lesson situation, so that can hardly be anything I can think of that's more individual. The advantage for the children of playing together in groups is the support they get from one another and the fun that they have. This repetition, whether it's performance or a group class, is not the heart of their instruction, but it allows permanence through exercise. You get the instruction yourself, but you're seeing somebody else get taught, and you're hearing these ideas being processed, and you see how it happens for them. And this accumulates into a bank of experience that you haven't lived long enough to have done that many times yourself. All those things take seed. And then with the watering of the individual instruction, they begin to grow, and pretty soon they've bloomed, and you have something wonderful.
One final misconception is that the Suzuki children don't read music. Instead of etudes and scales, Suzuki studies begin with real music. Students are taught to play first and then to read music once the playing skill has been established.
A lot of traditional teachers don't understand much about Suzuki method, and they feel that the kids never learn to read music. That's the biggest criticism. I would say to them that yes, children do learn to read music and they become excellent readers. We just wait until they're reading ready. We don't start them reading music at age 4 because they're not ready. They don't understand symbolism on paper.
We in this country were so excited about the value of the ear training that Dr. Suzuki's approach allows, that perhaps we did make errors in our timing, not in what we did, but in the timing.
I remember one of my own children, we delayed his reading longer than we should have, and so he was put in an orchestra in 7th grade, like in 3rd violins, because he couldn't read that well. But he was concertmaster by Christmas. And I said, I'm sorry you went through that. And he said, oh, it's all right. He said, I'll tell you one thing. It's a lot easier to learn to read than it is to play the violin.
Western teachers have been quick to add music reading and theory to the Suzuki curriculum. The required technical training is inherent in the Suzuki violin repertoire through a system of 10 instructional books. This step-by-step method has been adapted for the piano, viola, cello, flute, harp, guitar, bass, and recorder. The basic tenets of the mother tongue method differ from traditional methods on a number of levels. Unlike methods which often wait until the age of 9 before training begins, the Suzuki method is known for the enormous progress which occurs with students as young as 2 and 3.
Well, one of the things we know now from lots of research is that the human brain is extremely flexible in the first months and years of life, and the kinds of connections that can be made, and even the number of connections that can be made, is integrally tied to the richness of the experience that the organism has. So what a rich kind of bathing, which is the way I think about Suzuki and music, is in the early years of life, is it's sort of a daily tonic for the nervous system, and that investment in early age is very, very profound.
Suzuki intuitively knew that 50 years ago, and that comes about if the attitudes are developed in the first 3 years of life. So that's why I feel it is so important that we look beyond what has happened in the Suzuki music field and take these ideas into the whole child's education.
All Suzuki students begin their training by learning the international bow. This signals the beginning of the lesson and demonstrates respect between the teacher and the student. The child is then taught to stand quietly and focused through a full chorus of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. By the time Suzuki students have studied for several years, they have memorized 2 or 3 hours of music, and the numerous pieces are refined and remain at the students' fingertips.
That's a low sound. Yeah, let me hear it.
In traditional instruction, ear training is often delayed until the child is fluent in musical notation, but the Suzuki method teaches pitch recognition and rhythm from the very first lesson.
I think it's the most important thing, the training of the listening, of learning how to listen to music and how to listen to yourself. And I think having a lot of ear training early on in music lessons is very good, because we need to learn to listen, not only to other people, but we need to learn to listen to ourselves, so that what we're playing is what we mean from inside.
A strings, go.
Do I get to now? Yeah, go ahead.
Though most educators agree that introducing music into the environment at infancy is a positive gesture, Suzuki equates early exposure to music as planting the seed of ability. Parental involvement in this environment further differentiates the Suzuki method from traditional thinking.
It's a total three-way proposition between the teacher and the parent and the student, and that gives a lot of strength to it. And it also gives a uniqueness to this movement which is not always there in traditional teaching. My colleagues used to say, if you could just keep those parents out of this, I might be able to teach the kid. And that's a way of thinking about it which is quite inimical to our approach, which is you get everybody involved in a common purpose.
Well, what it was, I mean, our life was what Suzuki is talking about, is music from before birth and after birth, and I saw it happen. I didn't ever think of being any different, but this must have been in about 62. Bill, he would have been 3 years old, and his little brother would have been 1, and they were watching Captain Kangaroo in the living room, and I was working in the kitchen, and all of a sudden I heard all this yelling and come quick, and so I came in and I saw this original film from Japan, and I had been a traditional teacher for quite a while by this time, and so then it was like like a James Bond movie, being a spy, trying to find out how to find out about this method.
From the ages of about 5 to 8, I suppose, it was something fun to do. I mean, I did that. I also went out in the backyard and played ball and broke windows and all the other things that kids do. I did enjoy the sound, and also I think the social aspect of it, the positive approach, encouragement and gentility, if you will, is something that I think my parents related to very well, not only as music teachers, but in parenting.
I think one of the leading things that makes the Suzuki method different and so successful is the many ways it motivates the child. And there can be no better motivation than knowing that your parents think that you're really doing something wonderful.
And of course that's shaped my life.
The guiding principle of talent education is character first, then ability. The goal is not to create a professional musician, but to create a better human being.
I feel that any parent involved with what their child does in the nurturing stages keeps them growing as a person. As a teacher, that makes my job much easier, to know that the child is hopefully working on what they should work on at home and then come back to the lesson prepared. One of my roles at the beginning of the year is to make it clear to their parent that they may not have musical experience, but they can still take on this project as long as they have time to spend with their child at home. And I think that's something we still keep working on, because people are so involved and overworked that finding time, quality time to work with their children is one of my primary goals as a teacher. Right now, just think about you and the chair.
Being the type of child my daughter is, it makes me have to look at our relationship and the struggles that I see with us. When we're having struggles with the cello, we're usually struggling outside of there. So for me, it teaches me a lot about myself, and it makes me have to be more flexible. I look at it in several different ways. First of all, what I think it does is help her to be discipline, and I think she really needs that. And I think most children need to learn that there's something in life you consistently have to do. And it also teaches them that to be good at something, many times you can become good by simply repeating it over and over. And so to me, I don't care if she plays in the symphony orchestra. I mean, that's one of her goals among many other ones. But to me, if she can just play for relaxation when she's older, or play for her own pleasure, or play if she has children for them, it would be well worth it.
Suzuki says, everyone concerned with the development of the child must be of one mind and one spirit. The child will absorb something of the feeling, grow to be more feeling adults, and consequently make a kinder and better world within his or her reach.
Music is like Bible. Musicians are missionary. Dr. Suzuki must have been acting as a great missionary to convey God's word.
This is an extraordinary man, and we mustn't forget Dr. Suzuki, the man himself, this extraordinarily charming, grand communicator. There is no question when you're in his presence that you're in the presence of a great man. It's the communication that was the genesis of this whole movement, to communicate with young people in a war-torn country, to do something with their parents that would bond them and make their world a little bit more beautiful. That's what it's all about, and that's what must prevail.
Pablo Casals was 75 when he went to Japan to hear the Suzuki students play. He said, "Music must serve a purpose. It must be a part of something larger than itself, a part of humanity." It is this spirituality that Dr. Shinichi Suzuki seeks to bring to the world. To quote him, "When the human race created the culture of speech and writing, it also produced the sublime culture called music. It is a language that goes beyond speech and letters, a living art that is almost mystical. Yes. Bach, Mozart, Beethoven live clearly and palpably in their music and speak forcibly to us, purifying us, refining us, and awakening in us the highest joy and emotion. It was Mozart who taught me to know perfect love, truth, goodness, beauty. He left me a legacy. In his place, I am to further the happiness of all children. He has shown me the immortal light. Mozart says to me, life is sad, yes, but there is love. Let us go along together and comfort one another." Through the words of Issa, an 18th century Japanese poet, I understand Mozart ever more clearly. In one of his poems, Issa wrote, "Be it as it may, all my life is in your hands, now at the end of year. Though I am aware evening bells my curfew toll, I enjoy the cool."